Hi, everybody. This is Dr. K from Holistic Kids, and I'm so proud to also have my dearest friend, Dr. Ed Saroff.
I can't, I'm so happy to be here, Dr. K. I love you so much. And, and we're here just to really help you. We're trying to figure out what, topic to talk about. And I guess, it's not too hard to figure out. Coronavirus is dominating our news and our lives right now. So,
yeah. And, I think both of us have a similar perspective, right, Dr. Ed? It's that this is an awful time. It is a challenging time. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of worry. And not that we shouldn't be aware and not that we shouldn't be concerned, but I think there's an element of fear that may be a little excessive. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I see it every day. It's really important, in my heart of hearts to put a lot of what's happening in perspective. I think it's important to be very cautious. It's very important to take, the correct steps and follow the CDC guidelines. But, I think, as we talk about this, people will realize that if we put this in perspective, it will allow us to actually perhaps figure out, a different way of looking at this, which will help us in the future. What do you think?
I think that's exactly what I've been telling our families. So I'd love to hear your perspective. What do you see in this, time that we're living in? And what have you been sharing with your families?
Yeah, first, before we even get to that, I was thinking perhaps if you've had any families that have been positive and what their experience was like, because I would really love to get that feeling. We had about 3 families that were positive, and now we have another couple that they just had a very, light experience. And when I sent that information to most of my patients, it really had a soothing and calming effect. And it wasn't what they just watched on TV. Because as we watch TV, you see that unfortunate 30-year-old that's very healthy, pass away. And of course, the innate feeling is, oh my God, it's going to happen to all of us, but those are the rare circumstances, not the status quo. Have you had any positives so far in your practice?
Unfortunately, we haven't really had the opportunity to test that many people, but I can say just based on symptoms and, I think in looking back to possibly early February, where we were also having a lot of flu, I definitely, in looking back, I'm like, my God, we had probably more than several cases that could have been this virus. And at that time, I was aware of the fact that it was in China and it was coming. I didn't think that it would have already hit. So I know for a fact that we've had at least 4 or 5 children and families who have had it. And in one case, I had to prescribe azithromycin because the little guy got better. And then he started getting a little bit of a cough. And within 24 hours of starting the Z-Pak, he was perfect. And that was probably the most complicated course that I had within our practice. The interesting thing is that some of the families have reached out, and I actually had one of my own family members catch this, and this individual happened to be of higher risk, high blood pressure, diabetes, and the individual actually got really sick. And, what was scary, and this is when I had my wake-up call, this individual went to the urgent care and was prescribed big doses of steroids and levofloxacin because they thought she had bronchitis. It didn't even occur to them that this could have been coronavirus, even though it was like not too long ago. And then they got in touch with me and they're like, hey, this is going on. I can't breathe. I'm coughing like crazy. This is what the doctor prescribed me. I'm like, no, do not do that. And, this person was also taking some ibuprofen, and I told her to stop that. And I gave her some things to do. And thank God, like within 2 to 3 days, she started turning the corner and got much better.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Please.
No, and one of the things that I have seen, and I'm sure you would agree with this, like, there is no game plan. Like everyone is focused on, who's going to end up in the ICU and die. And yet we've had, outside of social distancing, which I absolutely agree with, there's no discussion about like, what do you do to keep yourself out of the ICU? It's just like, if you get it, you have some chance of dying, and that's just how it is. And there's nothing you can do about about it. So run away from everyone else and hide, which is totally appropriate, but we don't talk about anything else.
Yeah, well, if you look at our system, it's always reacting the pill for the ill approach. We're always reacting one step later, right? Even as a nation now. I mean, this could truly be one of those wake-up calls. And, again, in my heart of hearts, I think if we learn from this lesson of, when we possibly have a virus that could be a problematic virus in the future, I think the hospitals now are realizing that they're not prepared, and we don't have test kits. I mean, until just yesterday, and I mentioned this to you, is that there are some test kits that are now just becoming available for us. We had a few before, and that's how we knew. We had 3 families again who had positive results, and they had mild. The kids had very mild symptoms, like 2 or 3 days. That's it, just mild cold symptoms. The parents had flu-like symptoms, the dry cough. Some of them lost their sense of smell, which it seems like that's a very interesting correlation, and body aches and cough and some shortness of breath. And then there was one grandfather who was a doctor, I heard, who really had a difficult time, but he never was even hospitalized. So you have this, as you get older, possibility of getting worse. And, and then the other part, which is what you're bringing up, is what do we do in order to stay healthy?
Yeah.
What do we do to try to prevent this, which, so one part is from now on, what do we do as a society to be more prepared for this? And God forbid, if there's a worst case, like Ebola or something like that, where the whole system is working together, we're not without masks, you and me and our staff and even people. We're not hoarding toilet paper and all the other stuff that's happening outside, right? And then as a community, is we want to survive. What do we do in order to survive? What do we do in order to get through this much better? So what do you tell some of your families in terms of prevention? Is that, do you have any kind of, I know we practice similar in the sense, what are the main things that you've noticed help, from a standpoint of parents should know, and how do you think that, has helped your patient population be less sick or get better faster?
Yeah. So, when I realized that, the wave was coming, and, that we had to really step up our discussion, I started calling around and talking to, all the adults, smart adult docs that I know. And I was asking them, okay, like, what are you doing? What's your magic trick? Because I'm sure those guys, had something. And in talking to 4 or 5 of them, what they were all doing, the one commonality is they were using glutathione. And they were doing some vitamin C. Several of them were doing azithromycin. Some of them were doing the hydroxychloroquine already like a month ago. But everyone was doing glutathione. And in talking with them, I was like, so how is it going? And all of them were slammed. All of them were overwhelmed with a lot of patient questions and demands, and some people getting sick. But the one thing they said was this combination actually worked, and none of their patients had ended up in the ER so much as the ICU, which I thought was a pretty remarkable statement. And that was the moment that, I said, oh, gosh, this is amazing. So let me apply this. And, for my own family member and several other people, I basically used their protocol. So zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, glutathione, plus or minus the Z-Pak. And it seems to be working. It seems to be enough to just keep the intensification of the inflammatory cascade that's really harming these people to calm down. So yeah, that's what I've been sharing with our families, and that's what kind of the game plan that I have to help. I don't know if you've heard anything.
Well, I think first of all, that's great. A lot of people bring up, Tylenol affecting glutathione levels. So one thing it's important for everyone to know is that as you replenish it, you're helping. If you do need to treat that fever, you're helping replenish that glutathione level. So Tylenol's getting that rap. So it's important for our audience to know that, number one. And ibuprofen, I don't know why it I'm getting a lot of press that I'm reading about where it's almost detrimental. So, it's important that people know that perhaps we should avoid, ibuprofen, for this kind of, for this virus in particular. But what you mentioned is, essentially what I bring up, I say glutathione or NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which is the precursor to glutathione. So I give them the option for that. I also say, obviously probiotics, omegas, they're anti-inflammatory, good for the body. So the very basics, vitamin D, as some things that are not very specific, but can be helpful. The last thing is, like, I've heard quercetin can be helpful, which is not only good for anti-inflammatory, it's a good food source, which, has essentially no side effects that I've ever experienced as well. So that could be other things that, some of our families can add to their regimen.
Yeah.
I mean, when you give people a little bit more tools and use food or nutraceuticals and stuff like that as medicine, I think, other than social distancing, which we should all do, it could really give them the extra boost. So I love your approach.
Thank you. And I love yours. And, I'm glad that you brought up the probiotics, because I think this is one thing that's not on anyone's radar, right? You think about how much, people are obsessing over like the cytokine storm, and oh my God, elderberry can worsen the cytokine storm, because it causes a 2% increase in the cytokine storm. And, you shouldn't take it. I haven't seen anyone talk about the gut. And I'm so happy that you are, because when you break it down, like the majority of the immune system is controlled by the gut, right?
Yes.
And the one thing that we haven't really pieced together is that about 50% of the people that get the coronavirus have a nasty gastrointestinal inflammatory response with vomiting and diarrhea and all this stuff, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I've been told by one of the docs that I talked to is that perhaps part of this inflammatory response is coming from the gut. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you pointed out in terms of using probiotics, prebiotics, anything to really heal the gut and keep the gut from falling apart in the face of this illness. So,
well, if you look at our society, then we should really, that prevention has a lot of wisdom, how we eat, the sugar sources that we put on our body. This is an extra special time that families sort of can sit down with their kids and discuss a few things. What's actually in their shelves? What do they eat? What is sugar? I actually tell some of my families, just go, when the kids are a little older, like, 7 and up, I say, just go to the supermarket and, point out what's sugar, what's, hydrolyzed fat, just, as you go down the aisle. And when you do that, it becomes a great teaching experience. And, if the kids are watching TV or anything like that, they're bombarded by the cereals, right? They're bombarded by all this, processed garbage. And so if we're stuck at home, why not take the opportunity to discuss that with the kids? Say, how does our society trick us? And I like to use the word trick, because the kids, if it hits their heart and they're watching something, they're going to say, okay, that's a trick, that's good, that's not. And then if you go to the supermarket and you start looking around, you can just make it a game. So there's no fear, and everyone wants to create fear, right? We want to scare our kids not to do X, Y, Z. What if we make it fun, and sort of say, hey, let's find out what they do. So it becomes an amazing teaching opportunity now that we're all stuck. And then my other thing that I really like my families to know is about fear. Where does it come from? How do we, what is anxiety? I mean, that, when we're young and we're free, thank God we're not damaged enough to really go through the whole process of, constantly be worried about we're not good enough, there's something wrong with me, all that stuff that everyone eventually goes through. But if you get that opportunity as a mom and dad who's always doing so much work, if you sit down together at this moment and say, hey guys, we're all anxious, we can't do this, and we're afraid of getting sick. So what if we take this moment, where does fear come from, and discuss essentially uncertainty. When you have uncertainty, what does that mean? And what can we do about it? So what about mindfulness? What about meditation, right? This stuff, I put it as one of the keys to brain development on my physicals. I say the sixth thing I added just a few years ago, I'm like, it's mindfulness. We're always go, 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 do this, do that, right? But we don't sit down and work on us, read a book as adults, start calming this brain down. And I don't know about you. I mean, do you see anxiety in children? And if not the children, do you see it in your moms and dads and,
Yeah.
And people? And you see that often or not?
Unfortunately, in the community, I think that we work with, there are a lot of people that practice mindfulness on a pretty regular basis. I do have to say, in the light of this virus and the threat that it is at least posing, a lot of people are having pretty intense anxiety, and there's a lot of fear. And I'd say probably 40-50% of what I'm doing is just helping people calm down and step out of that anxiety and that fear. And I love what you're bringing up, because, I think that this is a great reminder of, life has uncertainty, right? Life is there's nothing about life that's ever fully certain. We think we know exactly what's going on, but then life kind of takes loops and turns, and, it brings us surprises, sometimes good, sometimes not. And I think that saying that, change is inevitable.
Yes.
And being in a place where we're adaptable. And I think, everything that you're touching on is really boiling down to, can we quickly and easily adapt to the challenges that life brings us as an individual, as families, and as a society? Or are we just stuck in a certain place? And that's one of the things that I see in our society, right? So our society is so stuck in, we treat things with vaccines. We need one well-defined pill that fixes something. And if we don't have that, we're completely lost, which is what's happening.
Yes.
Our society's ability to adapt and say, well, these are the tools we can use. People are dying and we don't have evidence, but we're going to use them and quickly learn how to utilize them. Like, we're doing amazing research studies, and there's a lot of information coming out. But what is puzzling to me, and I'm sure to you as well, is like, we'd rather have people go into the ICU and die and wait for definitive information to come in terms of how to prevent this, rather than saying we're just going to learn along the way and we'll be as mindful as possible to protect every member of our society. And we're not doing that. And I think it really boils down to, can we adapt? And that comes from mindfulness. That comes from a place of, having robust ability to say, okay, we need to pivot. We need to do this. We need to do that. And I think that's part of why you and I love being in integrative medicine. This is part of what we teach our families, right?
Yes. Well, it's the biggest joy I have, even when I see a new family have their first baby, because again, everything is new and it's, relatively scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, is, I say the most constant thing in your life is change. And if you embrace that, it allows you to do what you're talking about. It allows you to not only adapt, but enjoy your own adaptation, right? The days are short, the years, the days are long, the years are short with those newborns.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sit down at the 1-year physical and it's gone by so quickly. So it's so important then, that you and I as pediatricians, we're not just, talking about, how much they weigh and, how many times they poop and, what they feed. All that's very important. But really is, how do you think? What can you go beyond your day-to-day and say, what am I doing as a whole, right? How am I going to enjoy this journey? So I love what you say. It's so important, because you start changing your focus in how you see life. You change your destiny, and you change that kid's destiny. So if you're struggling, we need to discuss that. We need to figure out what how to get beyond that, that immediate way that we're looking at things. And I think that's what's happening a lot right now with our nation. I mean, this is new. It's horrible. As far as lives, the numbers are not going to get massive. Even, 99.99% of us will survive this. I always say that this is not Ebola. You're going to have lives lost, which is horrible. One life is too much. But, the livelihoods, I mean, imagine, I think there's going to be God forbid, I really think there's going to be a lot of suicides, that will happen after this. It's like the last crash we had. There's people don't focus on, even for children, right? Teenagers and 20-year-olds, the number 2 reason kids die is suicide. It's not infectious disease. Number 3 is homicide. A lot of this is emotional. So what you say, it's really a mind, body, and soul approach. We have to focus on all. And that's why, again, I love even the name of your practice, holistic, kids. We do always have to work on, train our mind to be better, and God forbid connected. I mean, that's one thing we're also missing in this, in this world. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you're saying, because I mean, if nothing else, and I'm sure you're experiencing this, a lot of our families are saying this. For myself, I find, if nothing else, this is creating a pause. It's like the universe has pushed the pause button on life. Everything is forced to slow down. I'm seeing, from across the street, neighbors that I would see once a month. I'm seeing them on a regular basis. I'm hanging out with my family more often than I have. And I've had more time to just be present. Not that I wasn't doing it before, but, before everything was just go, go. And then like, okay, time to meditate, and then go, go. So in a way, it's like everything in life is being forced to slow down. And if we can, like you said, embrace that, and say, what, life is changing and we have no control over the change. There are things that we can control, which is, how we process it right here in our heart. And how do we hold the space to allow something good to come out of this awful, awful scenario? Because it's really awful, right? There's so many things that are the stressors that are going to come, the people's livelihoods that are destroyed, the poor people that are sick and dying. Like, there's so much awfulness. But I think what you had touched on is, if we can somehow create something at least less dark, if not good, out of this, and as a society become better, that would be huge.
Well, it's not a should, in my opinion. It's a must. We must have a new normal. I don't want things, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. Hell no. In normal, we judge each other, we brand each other, we exclude other people. This must be, the opportunity we take for us to connect. I don't care, what race you are, what religion you are, how much money you have, you don't have. It doesn't matter what gender you are. This doesn't care. Virus is a virus. You see how everyone's life will change, and it must change. And we must choose better. We can't, it's not okay for all of this to happen and for us to go back to the status quo.
Yeah.
So I'm praying, I'm hoping, I'm talking, I'm whatever, and and I love you for the same leadership that you're doing in terms of allowing people to see that. This is a must, so it's a new normal. I love a new normal. That's how it should be, and so, again, whatever we can to, and anyone watching this, anyone, I hope if they get a little inspired, that they have these conversations every single day. Because if we do it together, if we start talking differently, we start looking at each other differently, even from border wise, in nation to nation, knowing that we are all, all mortal. And we perhaps can change how we act towards one another. That will be worth it.
Yeah.
That would be the only way that this craziness will be worth it. Otherwise, we're just wasting time and wasting our energies.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's I think what many of us feel in our hearts. You know, and looking at where we were, God, like we were so divided. We were divided as families. We were divided as people. We were divided as countries. The entire world was so divided on so many different levels. And when you look at the timing of this, you know, like countries were jumping at each other, you know, unions were falling apart, families were falling apart, people were getting divorced left and right. And you know, I so appreciate what you are bringing up, because if we can look at this and say, you know what, we need to have a fresh start. We need to look at things differently. And you know, I look at like where things will be for our future generations if we don't get our act together. Like what's happening now will be child's play in comparison to, you know, the awful reality that our future generations are going to have to face. And we keep pushing all of that off. And maybe this is a time that we must step up and really look at life and what we're prioritizing and what we're doing, and you know, how we're looking at all of these short-term gains with a lot of long-term costs.
So let's not waste this time then.
Yes.
Right? This is a great opportunity to have that connection.
Yes.
You know, we can learn about supplements. We can learn how to protect ourselves. We can learn, you know, how we're eating, when we're not exercising, you know, really start practicing mind, body, spirit, soul connection. You know, and, you know, if we do this together, there's real opportunity for some beautifulness to come out of here. So everyone watching, you know, please do your response, you know, your task, your duty, you know, let's 100%, you know, adhere to the CDC guidelines. Let's, you know, be very careful so that we can, you know, get this curve much, you know, knocked out much faster. It will help lives. We don't want to take this lightly, knowing that most of us will do well, you know, but we all have a responsibility to protect our parents and our grandparents, you know, and people who are not diagnosed with stuff. I mean, there's a lot of genetic variations we have that haven't been challenged. We don't, you know, there are sensitive people out there. You see it with, you know, kids, right? Mm-hmm. Not everyone's the same, you know. No. One medication can kill one kid and another one you can save. Yeah. We have to respect each other's individuality. Yeah. So let's do our role, you know, let's do our part.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And I think a lot of times people see it as either or, right? Either you're the guy breaking all the rules and, you know, you're not taking this seriously enough, or you're just obsessed with the rules, and that's how you're a good person. And I think that's your point, right? You can follow all the rules, be socially responsible, do everything that's asked of you, and, you know, potentially more to make sure that, you know, poor people that can't handle this virus don't die. But at the same time, step outside of this mindset. And I think this is the thing that is frustrating a lot of people, and why you and I decided to come together to create this, which is that you don't need to be consumed by fear. And, you know, unfortunately, that's what our media is pushing, just fear, just bombardment of fear. People are dying, you know, this is happening. 2 kids have died, you know, and it's just one message of fear after another. And I get it. We need people to be responsible, and maybe some people, that's the only way they're going to be responsible. But I would hope that messages of positivity and hope and growth, just like what we're talking about, really start permeating through the mindset and through the discourse of people, because we really need that too. If we just sit in fear and we walk out of this with fear, and ultimately as a society, we're just more disconnected than we before, and we're just now paranoid of each other because, oh my God, what if that person's the person that's going to kill me because they cough on me? Then we haven't achieved anything. And I think if that was to happen, that would be a really sad, further saddened state of affairs, right? That would be even worse than where we are now. Yeah. But if we can look at this and say, oh my God, like how much do I miss human contact? Like we haven't physically seen my parents or my mother-in-law in weeks. We Skype with them, we do video calls, but being mindful of them and their older age, like we're keeping our distance, and we're saying, sorry, you can't see your grandkids, and it's killing them. it's killing them, because that's part of their main purpose of being alive right now. So we're doing all of this, but at the same time, I think for us to be cognizant, what does it mean to be human? What it means to be human is for us to be connected, for us to be around each other, for us to enjoy one another and to enjoy each other's company. And go ahead.
Well, you know, what you point out with the fear is so important. I just want everyone to know that if we are not careful, you know, like as you're saying, the fear becomes trauma. And then the trauma becomes anxiety and depression. And the number 2 and 3 killer in this nation is suicide and homicide for young people. So there's more harm that can be, you know, that we can have from this if we're not careful. Now, if everyone, again, takes it to heart and takes this as an opportunity to teach kids, where does fear come from? What we're afraid of? You know, all the things that, you talk to your kids, you'll see that they don't think they're good enough. Everyone goes through that phase, right? If you have that closeness, you'll see their fear already, that they're not going to be accepted, that they think there's something wrong with them. I know that every human being goes through this regardless. But if we can talk about it now as a family, you can prevent all that, right? If that's the biggest problem in our society and we're not connected, and we can discuss we can discuss it, and if we don't know enough, learn about it, right? And then there's all these beautiful practitioners, Reiki, you know, acupuncture, you know, mindfulness, meditation, and, you know, energy healers. There's all these different people that can give us different perspectives for this and healing towards this. You know, we have a muscle therapist here that's, I mean, she has magical hands, and she talks about trauma a certain way, and when people are finished, you know, they're like, I don't even understand what happened, because they get such an amazing release. So there's all these different practitioners that we also don't accept, because, you know, you must go to medical school and, you know, or DO school to be okay. But naturopaths, you know, right? We use these people a lot, because we know, you know, to treat anyone holistically, we want them to see both inside the box, but also outside the box. And if we can, again, connect with people this way, you know, that fear you're discussing can be changed around, and the next generation may not, you know, go through the same process of, again, number 2 killer. It's terrible. It's absolutely awful where we're heading. So, you know, perhaps we can just focus on the new normal, Pejman. Dr. Cataray, what do you think? Is that a nice way to say new normal?
The new normal that doesn't have to be negative. And, you know, I think that in my messaging and, you know, in your messaging, part of what we're communicating to people is there are ways you can reframe things, right? And, you know, part of what I've been communicating with my families is, you know, don't buy everything that you're told. You know, the media is saying, oh my God, like 4% of people that get this virus die. And when you look at it, like you look at Germany, you look at Korea, where they're testing everyone they can find. They're finding that no, it's more like 1%, maybe 0.5%, which means that this is worse than influenza by 5 times, maybe 10 times, but not 30 times. And at the end of the day, I think how we can frame things, how we can understand things, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to teach to people, you know, let's look at things differently. Be mindful, be concerned, be aware, but frame this in the light that, oh my God, this isn't the boogeyman that's knocking on my door, Ebola or whatever, that's going to kill me and everyone else in a plight. You know, this isn't the plague. It's awful. It's awful. It's harming people, but let's step out of that fear pattern. And I think what I've seen and what you see, I'm sure, is, you know, we have this, as you touched on, we have a society that's just built on fear. Everyone, you know, it's like, flu is going to kill you, get your flu shot. This is going to kill you, do this. You know, run to this medication because this is going to kill you. You know, cholesterol is going to kill you, so take this medication. And people have just been bred to be afraid so they couldn't consume, which is why people are called consumers, right? If you look at just that term, what are people called? Consumers. people out there, our companies look at us as consumers, and our job is to do what? To consume. And we consume because we're taught to fear. And these are the things that I think we really need to step back and look at, and to help others start reframing this in a totally different light.
And that's it. That's a true practitioner, so mind, body, spirit, and hopefully a new normal.
Yes.
A new normal based on higher standards, based on connection, based on love, and based on unity.
Yes.
So
yes. Amen.
Let's amend that hardcore. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and maybe we should do this more often.
I would love that. And I'm so grateful that you took the time, and for us to do this together, because I think we need so much more light to come into this world, right? Especially right now, we need so much more positivity and reframing to happen. And I'm thankful that you're here, and I'm thankful for you as who you are and the message you bring into this world.
That. Yeah, you're a great soul. So we'll talk about another topic, and we'll do another one of these later on. Okay.
Sounds wonderful.
Love you. Take care.
You too. All right.
Bye,
be well. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.